Hello everyone! Iansan's most unique pupil, Varesa, will be the one new 5-star character releasing in patch 5.5. Based on her initial beta kit, Varesa is looking to be another solid natlan DPS being added to the roster who is very mobile in combat despite her laid-back appearance and love for food, and she just might be the next best Electro main DPS that Genshin has to offer. To see how good Varesa is looking at the moment, let's discuss the details of her initial beta kit. As always, remember that this is very early information, so very subject to change. Varesa is a 5-star Electro Catalyst user that ascends with crit rate. She is designed to be natlan's first Electro main DPS that focuses on plunge damage. All her abilities help enable the plunge playstyle, with both her skill and burst having cooldown resets to facilitate more plunge damage. You can imagine Varesa as the 5-star Electro version of Gaming, but without the gameplay awkwardness that Gaming has with having to catch his lion to reset his skill. Varesa may just have the most convoluted kit description of any character I've ever seen in Genshin, as you need info from all three of her talents together to piece out how Varesa will play. However, once Varesa's kit is broken down, it is much simpler to understand than it might seem. In order for Varesa to go up into the air and plunge on her own, she needs to use her charged attack. Once in the air, she can do a normal plunge, and once her plunge hits an enemy, Varesa will gain 25 Nitzel points. However, if you played Hu Tao, you'll know that charged attacking takes stamina, which becomes a limited resource. Because of this, Varesa doesn't use her normal charged attack but relies on her elemental skill, which has 2 charges. When held, she'll run super fast for overworld exploration. When pressed, Varesa dashes forward to deal damage, gains 20 Nitzel points and resistance to interruption, and allows her next normal attack to become a charged attack that doesn't consume stamina. So one standard Varesa plunge will consist of skill, pressing normal attack to perform a charged attack, and the actual plunge attack. This order of abilities will give Varesa 45 Nitzel points, and the max she can hold is 40. When Varesa has full Nitzel points, she will enter Nitzel's Blessing and go into the Fiery Passion state. This enhanced state will give Varesa another usage of her skill and increases the damage of all her abilities. With the damage buff and extra skill usage, Varesa will want to do another plunge with skill, charge attack, plunge attack. Once Varesa performs this enhanced plunge attack, she will consume all her Nitzel points and exit her Fiery Passion state. After doing this, Varesa will enter yet another enhanced state called Apex Drive. This gives her interruption resistance and access to a special version of her burst. Normally, Varesa's burst costs 70 energy with an 18-second cooldown, has the typical burst animation that all characters have, and it deals damage more if she's in Fiery Passion. However, the special burst that Varesa can use costs 30 energy and has its cooldown reset whenever Varesa enters Apex Drive. However, it is just another AoE damage instance without the usual burst animation. Thus, the overall gameplay loop of Varesa's kit is as follows. After setting up your support skills and you switch to Varesa, you'll use her skill, charged attack, and plunge to completely fill up Varesa's Nitzel gauge. This will make Varesa enter Fiery Passion and enhance the damage of her next set of skill, charged attack, and plunge combo. After this, Varesa will consume all her Nitzel points but will enter Apex Drive, allowing you to use the lower energy cost version of her elemental burst. Then you'll redo this same attack chain of unbuff plunge, buff plunge into special burst a second time before looping back to your supports. For some teams, you may be able to fit in another unbuff skill, charged attack, plunge combo before switching back to your supports. Remember that every charged attack is just activated by pressing normal attack because you use Varesa's skill right beforehand. So even though the kit description is very confusing with multiple names of enhanced states, the actual buttons you need to press is straightforward and flows well. Lastly, both of Varesa's combat passives simply buff her damage. Her A1 increases the damage of one plunge attack after using her skill more while she's in the Fiery Passion state, and her A4 passive gives Varesa attack whenever Nitzel Burst is triggered up to 60% attack. That's everything on Varesa's base kit. Varesa does use every single ability to deal damage. Looking at the current multipliers of all her talents, her talent leveling priority at the current moment is normals first, then burst, then skill. Next, let's cover Varesa's initial beta constellations. Varesa's C1 makes her A1 passive always give 50% damage bonus to her plunges rather than alternate between 25% and 50%. In addition, it gives Varesa 25% attack when she enters the Fiery Passion state and increases the duration of her overworld mobility. C2 makes it so that Varesa can use her special lower energy cost burst after every plunge attack she does. So instead of her typical attack combo of unbuff skill charge attack plunge, buff skill charge attack plunge, and then special burst, with C2 you can always use the special burst after each skill charge attack plunge combo, whether it is buffed by the Fiery Passion state or not. C2 also gives Varesa energy after she does a plunge attack to help her have enough energy to use all these bursts. C3 increases her burst talent level by 3. With C4, if Varesa uses her normal burst that has the animation, longer cooldown, and larger energy cost, she will greatly buff the damage of her next normal plunge attack. If she uses the special version with a lower energy cost and resetting cooldown, it will deal increased damage. C5 increases her normal talent level heal by 3, and lastly, C6 gives 30 energy to Varesa when she enters Apex Drive, which likely allows you to actually use her regular burst in rotation, and 10 crit rate and 100 crit damage to her plunging attacks and burst. It also gives you an even longer duration of overworld mobility. Overall, Varesa's constellations are actually looking not that strong at the moment. HOYOVerse has recently liked to make C1, C2, or both C1 and C2 very strong constellations that increase the character's damage a lot to get you to pull more copies, especially for many of the recent Fontaine and natlan characters. Varesa's constellations currently don't buff her damage to this extent. C1 only gives buffs to some of her existing plunges, and while C2 does give you extra burst cast, this also increases her rotation length, which counteracts some of the damage gain. Because of this, I do think Varesa's constellations will be buffed in the upcoming weeks. Next, let's go over Varesa's potential build options. Her signature weapon will be her clear best in slot. High base attack, crit damage substat, and the special passive gives her even more attack and even more crit damage to Varesa's plunging attacks. Two other 5-star weapons that look good on Varesa include Kagura's Verity and Lost Prayers. You can also use Skyward Atlas and Shen Yun's signature, however, these two 5-star options look a bit worse than the first two I mentioned. For 4-star weapons, the best looking one currently is the Witsith, as the crit damage substat is valuable and 2 out of the 3 buffs from his passives are very good on Varesa, the attack and elemental damage. You will want to hope to avoid the elemental mastery buff, though it is not completely useless, especially if you're running Dendro related teams. For a free to play weapon option, the best looking one currently is the Fontaine craftable Floating Purity. For artifacts, patch 5.5 is releasing new natlan artifacts, and Long Night's Oath, a plunging focus set, is made for Varesa's kit. Because Varesa uses her elemental skill, charged attack, and plunge attack all together, she easily stacks the 4-piece effect, and this artifact will give a total of 100% plunging attack damage bonus for Varesa. However, even though most of Varesa's damage is plunge damage, she does still do some damage with her elemental skills and charge attacks, which won't get buffed by this artifact set. Because of this, 4-piece Obsidian Codex is actually very similar in performance. Even though the 2-piece won't have good uptime as Varesa constantly enters and exits Nightsoul's Blessing, she'll be able to maintain the crit rate after her second plunge, and both the damage bonus and crit rate buffs all her damage compared to only her plunge attacks. However, I do expect changes in the upcoming weeks that will make the new plunge artifact set the more preferable choice. For artifact stats, Varesa is your typical attack scaling carry, so attack hourglass, electro damage or attack goblet, and crit circlet, with all the usual substats to look for such as ER and TOR requirements, which currently looks to be about 120 to 140 ER, crit, and attack percent. EM can be useful in Dendro teams, but you shouldn't prioritize it. Lastly, let's cover Varesa's potential team comps. As a plunge focused DPS, one obvious support to consider is Shen Yun, the premier plunge support and healer. Shen Yun is definitely one of Varesa's strong supports, however she has strong teams that don't use Shen Yun, so Varesa isn't completely reliant on her compared to other plunge DPSs like Xiao. The one support that Varesa does really want is Iansan, her coach, and the new 4-star Electro support releasing in the same patch. If you want more in-depth details on Iansan, be sure to check out my video analyzing her initial beta kit. To summarize, Iansan brings a lot of attack and damage bonus to the active character, similar to Bennett, but instead of being confined to a circle, Iansan wants movement to maximize her buffs. And since Varesa moves around a lot with her dashes and plunges, her kit perfectly synergizes with Iansan. Thus, all of Varesa's best teams will include Iansan. Varesa's current highest healing team in terms of damage is Chevrus Overload. With C6 Iansan and C6 Chevrus, Varesa's dashes and plunges will allow her to maintain full uptime of all of Iansan's buffs to deal high damage. And even without high constellations on the 4-star supports, this team should still perform solidly. Next, you can run an Electrocharge team with Farina as the Hydro that's focused on buffing Varesa's damage, using either Shen Yun or Shilonen as the final support slot. You can also decide to drop Farina and just run both Shen Yun and Shilonen for a mono Electro team buffing Varesa. In terms of Dendro comps, Varesa looks good in aggravate teams alongside Iansan, Shen Yun, and your choice of Dendro. Lastly, while Hyperbloom oriented teams may not look the strongest for Varesa, they should work fine with units like Iansan, Farina, and Baiju. And that's everything on Varesa as of now. With her current beta kit, Varesa looks to be yet another strong DPS released from natlan. She's not breaking any damage ceilings like Mawika did, but she is similar in strength to all of the other 5-star natlan DPSs. Moalani, Kanich, and Shaska all have top tier teams in terms of damage, with various other teams that are strong as well. Varesa is no different, having top meta teams like Chevrus Overload, and various other strong teams like Aggravate and hypercarry oriented teams with buffers like Farina, Shen Yun, and Shilonen. But of course, like many other main DPSs, Varesa does come with her share of flaws. Many of Varesa's teams will have either Shilonen or Shen Yun, and combined with Varesa's innate interruption resistance, those teams will have plenty of survivability. However, in Varesa's current best team in terms of sheet DPS, Chevrus Overload, Iansan is the only character that provides defensive utility as she can heal with her A4 passive, but this healing is, at the moment, very little, so there may be survivability issues with her current best team. Speaking of iansan, because Varesa's kit synergizes so well with iansan, most if not all of Varesa's teams also want iansan in the team to be strong, since iansan's buffs are so valuable. Sure, you can definitely use another Electro support like Fischl and Varesa's teams will still work, but they will be significantly weaker. As another Electro main DPS, Varesa can be compared with Cloran, who I consider the best Electro main DPS in the game currently, and both play in many of the same team archetypes such as Chevreuse Overload and Aggravate. If I were to compare both of them in their best teams in terms of sheet DPS, which is Chevreuse Overload with C6 4-star supports, based on the calcs I've seen from pre-release TC, Varesa does do a bit more damage than Cloran on paper. So Varesa is arguably looking to be the next best 5-star Electro main DPS in terms of damage, but keep in mind that pre-release calcs and actual gameplay can vary a lot. In addition, both Varesa and Cloran have very different playstyles. And lastly, Cloran can use a wide variety of supports that can function well with her, while Varesa's optimal support pool is a bit more limited, making Cloran a bit more versatile in team building. But regardless of which DPS you prefer, Varesa in her current state is looking to be another top tier DPS. Hopefully HOYOVerse doesn't change her too much in the upcoming weeks of her beta. I hope this initial overview and analysis on Varesa's kit was helpful to you all. I will continue to analyze any significant beta changes made to Varesa, so if you want to keep track of the beta changes, I highly recommend subbing to the channel to keep up to date with the latest beta news with TC influence analysis. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or like the video if you enjoyed. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.